So this morning I read the Imperial College London report on the COVID-19 response. This is the report that got the US and the UK to take this seriously. But it's pretty bleak, and it actually explains why we're doing what we're doing and why it's so important. And by doing what we're doing, I mean not spending time in a room with one another, which is why I have time to record this video. You can generate this curve, and I'll try to show you what this looks like. See this black curve here? This is the number of people per 100,000 people. In the US, it's the blue line, and in the UK is the black curve, that will die as a function of time. This spans from March to about August is about where they kind of stop if we do nothing. So if we do nothing, about 500,000 people in the UK will die, and about 2.2 million people in the US will die. The problem is that if it was that simple, you could maybe, if you're a bad person, say, well, we're just going to let those people die. The problem is that the actual death rate would be substantially higher. This is for Great Britain. Of course, it's a British report, but there's American data. A lot of this data is collected in the back for the US. So here, you see how many people will get sick in Great Britain, sick enough to have to go to the hospital. So at peak in Great Britain, it's about 270 people per 100,000 people. The problem is, if you look down here, there's this little red line, and that little red line is per 100,000 people, how many intensive care unit beds there are. So all of these people are not going to receive proper medical care, which means a lot of these people are going to die that didn't have to die because they are not part of that 500,000 in Britain that are bad enough to die. So if you do nothing, extra people will die, and those extra people are somewhere between 8 and 30 times the number of people who would die if you could give them proper medical care. So the paper talks about strategies to stop this from happening. So there's two types of things you can do. You have mitigation strategies and you have suppression strategies. So mitigation strategies are kind of what you normally do during the seasonal flu, is you just say, okay, well, old people, specifically people over 70, shouldn't go out in public. You should wash your hands a lot. These kind of simple things that we've done forever. And a pharmaceutical mitigation strategy, if you have a vaccine but it's in short supply, is you give that vaccine to people that are at high risk, right? We've done this in the past for seasonal flu pandemics. You give it to the elderly, you give it to the young, you give it to pregnant women, because the idea is those people can't get it. Because if they get it, it's very bad. It's worse than just having the flu. But people like me, who is relatively young and doesn't have a respiratory problem, it's fine. I can get the flu, it's fine. In fact, I could probably get coronavirus, I'd probably be fine. That's not the important thing here, because it turns out that if you deploy those strategies, pure mitigation strategies like we normally do for flu, you end up with still overwhelming the ICU capacity. So the paper addresses various strategies like anyone that's sick stays home. Anyone that lives with somebody that is sick stays home for 2 weeks. You close workplaces, you close public functions, you close mass gatherings, you close schools, you close universities. All of these things they looked at individually. And typically closing schools has been considered to be like the harshest thing that you could possibly do. It turns out that all of those individually don't do nearly enough. You are still going to have tens of thousands of people, in some cases hundreds of thousands of people, depending on the strategy, die that didn't have to die because there's not enough ICU beds. So you have to do them all. You have to get everybody to stop interacting with as many people as is possible, because you have to slow the spread of the infection. You have to take that peak of the curve and drop it down to the point that at no time is that curve significantly above that red line. And it turns out that that's really hard for this thing. It also turns out that given the present numbers, it looks like about a third of people that have it and are contagious never show symptoms, ever. So there's people now that are probably over it, that didn't even know they ever had it. So how long does this have to go on? It has to go on until a very important condition is met, and that is herd immunity. Enough people have to be immune to the disease for it to basically die off. That means enough people have to have had it and fought it off, and presently we don't think you can get it again. That's an assumption, but we'll learn more about that as time goes on. Or you have to be vaccinated against it so that you can't get it in the first place. So for that second one, you need to have a vaccine. Well, it takes about 18 months to get a vaccine, because not only do you have to make sure it's safe before you inject it into functionally every human being on this planet, but you have to make enough of it and then distribute it and inject it into every human being on this planet, or something like 80%. So that herd immunity is definitely kicking in, and then the disease will basically just die off. If somebody gets it, there won't be enough people around them for them to spread it to anybody, and it'll end in that person, and then the virus just dies off. That's how this works with seasonal flu, right? Are we gonna be like this for 2 weeks, for a month, for 6 months, or for 18 months? Well, it's kind of going to be like this for 18 months. However, there's something else in the paper which is very interesting. They point out that if you impose this in their model for 5 months, you do what we are doing right now for 5 months, and then you tell everybody, hey, go back to work, go back to school, all this stuff, you get a pandemic. It's a smaller pandemic because some of the people got it when the curve was flattened, right? When you could handle the hospital capacity. But then you're still going to overwhelm the hospital capacity. So what they propose is this. We do this for a while. Something probably like 2 months. And in the US, the White House kicked around August, and that sounds about right. So if you live in the US, what we're doing now is probably going to continue to August. But some businesses might reopen. It depends. We're feeling it out as we go. Then after about 2 months, when you've kind of got the number of cases under control, right? Because everyone that's isolating isn't spreading it to anybody else apart from the people they live with and the very small number of people they come into contact with outside. Then it looks like you've got it under control. In reality, it's still there, okay? But then what you do is you lift some of these restrictions. You let people go back to work. Maybe you reopen schools for a while, maybe like a month. Then the number of cases is going to start to go back up. You're going to see more people in the ICU. So what the outbreak looks like is this. You get this initial spike, and then this is how long you're doing everything that we're doing right now. Social distancing, closing schools, all that kind of stuff. It drops down, then you have so few cases that you go, okay, you can go back to work. You can open the schools. And then there's basically no restrictions. We should still social distance, but all the most restrictive things are lifted. Then the cases go back up. But look how much smaller the peak is. But this is still really bad. That's still really bad. That's a lot of cases, right? So then you reimpose all these restrictions, and then it starts to go back down. But why would you do this? Why? It's because all these people, they're immune now. See, they're immune. Without a vaccine, they're immune. Right? It sucked for them, but they're immune now. Okay? So then some of these cases, you got more cases, more exposure, people weren't immune. You lift the restrictions, the cases start to come back up, you put the restrictions on again. And then it comes back down. And you see, you keep getting this. You keep getting this shape. And hopefully each of these shapes is below that curve. It's below that ICU bed line, right? The mortality rate doesn't change. It's still like 3%, right? So a lot of people are going to die. We probably can't stop a lot of people from dying. But we can stop a lot more people from dying. And that's what we're doing. So you don't feel sick. You want to go to the bar, don't do it. Don't do it. It sucks, but don't do it, because you could kill people. Really, you could kill people. We're doing this so that tens of millions of people don't die. But there's one line at the end of the report. It's literally the last sentence that I think is amazing. We emphasize that it is not at all certain that suppression will succeed long term. No public health intervention with such disruptive effects on society has been previously attempted for such a long duration of time. How populations and societies will respond remains unclear.